Hannah, what flour are you using in your sourdough microbaker? Every type of flour has a different protein percentage, and those protein percentages can vary greatly depending on the brand that you're buying and the way that it was milled. Certain bread flours behave differently than other bread flours. You'll find that all-purpose flours are all different. Freshly milled flours are all different. All different kinds of grains act differently. For example, I freshly mill 10 to 40% of all of the flour that goes into my bread recipes, and I use all different kinds of grain. I change the grain depending on the taste, the texture, and the rise that I'm looking for, and how I want the crumb to look, and how strong and fluffy and airy I want the loaf to be. I use Kirkland all-purpose flour in all of my recipes as the base. This is actually Central Milling's ABC Plus flour. It's white labeled for Costco. It is a very strong all-purpose flour that could be considered a bread flour. It just teeters on that protein percentage between all-purpose and bread flour. It's organic, I can buy it in bulk, and I love the way that it makes my bread taste. Whenever I'm experimenting, I will start with about 10% freshly milled flour. I do hard white wheat, hard red wheat, rye, spelt, and einkorn. All of my customers have different expectations on what they want their sourdough bread to taste like. If I'm doing a seasonal rotation or just adding a specialty flavor to the menu, say I wanted to add a honey wheat loaf or a rye loaf, I set the expectation that that particular loaf will be a little bit grainier, have a higher percentage of freshly milled flour, which contains more of the whole bran and germ in the flour, and it's also going to have less of a rise. Unlike a bread flour recipe or an all-purpose flour recipe, you're going to get an exceptionally light, fluffy, and airy loaf that gets the biggest oven spring, if you will. And as soon as you add in any kind of flour or grain, you're going to change the behavior of the loaf and the dough. I use the most of hard white wheat grains from Grand Teton and spelt, so I have these in big tubs. For my classes, I use King Arthur bread flour, and I get the 50-pound bags from Restaurant Depot. Also use some of their all-purpose flour for my classes. If you're using a bread flour recipe or an all-purpose flour recipe, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to take your baking to the next level and elevate your sourdough bread, I highly recommend adding some freshly milled flour or some whole wheat flour into your recipes. It definitely adds a depth of flavor and taste and texture to your breads. I prefer to experiment and always rotate my different flours and offer different flavors. It makes me a better baker to experiment with different flours and know how each flour works. I hope that answers your question.